What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Kicking It with Crowder. It's episode 26 of season 2, guys. So we're 75th overall show tonight. And tonight, guys, we're joined by Matt Moscona from ESPN 104.5 Baton Rouge. Matt, how you doing tonight, Matt?
Good, man. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Matt, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on, man. And just wanted to talk a little bit about you with the New Orleans market. I know you're down there in Saints territory, and I'm up here in Georgia. So we're rivals on the field, but we're friendly tonight. So I want to talk a little bit about the Saints situation, Jahmyr Chase, Arik Gilbert, Zion Williamson. So I'm sure you'll be excited to talk about all that stuff tonight. All right,
man. For sure. Fire away. I'm well versed and probably as much as anybody you might talk to. So yeah, man.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Matt. So to begin with, man, how long you been in the sports radio game? Kind of what you got your start in the radio, and where'd you go to school and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So the really quick bio, I guess. Born in New Orleans, moved to Baton Rouge in '89. Went to school here. Freshman year of college, actually went to Holy Cross in South Bend, same place where Rudy went. Hated the football, the food, the women, and the weather. Those 4 things, and not necessarily in that order, brought me back home. Finished up at LSU. Always knew I wanted to do media. Begged and clawed my way into a part-time promotions intern gig at a radio station. Did every odd job and awful job nobody else wanted to do, but worked my way up. And I always thought I wanted to do news. Did about 4 years of news radio. Figured I hated it, and sort of accidentally went into sports. And that was in 2007. LSU won a national championship that year. Pretty good year to start doing sports in these parts.
Yeah.
And loved it. My current show I've done since 2011 on the ESPN affiliate in Baton Rouge, and we're syndicated in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria, regionally on TV, on Cox Sports Television. We won awards, we made a lot of money, and have a big audience, and I'm really blessed to basically be paid to talk about teams that I love. So it's a really sweet gig.
Yeah, and it's definitely a grind. You know, the sports industry, a lot of people, they're kind of, it's cutthroat business. You know, that a lot of people not really trying to help other people out. But I've been grateful to come across people who are willing to come on my show like yourself, and I'm trying to get my foot in the door. I'm a sports management major, and love sports. Knew I wanted to do something in sports, but I've only been going about this for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So I'm just getting my feet wet in a sense, building my resume a little bit. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Well, I'll tell you, there's 2 people you'll find. And so I've been in media for 18 years now. You'll find there's 2 types of people. There's people who see everybody as competition, and they will step on your face to get where they want to go.
Yeah.
And there's people who realize wherever they are in their career, they had help getting there, and they're willing to pay it forward and help anybody. So I like to think that I'm the latter, not the former, and I'm always willing to help, and I'm appreciative of people who helped me along the way. But man, I'll tell you, Tyler, and I mean anybody who has ambitions of doing this professionally, with a college degree, I worked for 7 years before I got a full-time job. 7 years. And that full-time job paid me $24,000 a year when I finally got it 7 years into my career.
Yeah.
Most people don't make it in this industry because it is a war of attrition early. And you've got to be able to persevere through crappy jobs nobody wants to do, thinking you're never going to get your opportunity, eating a whole bunch of like 50-cent ramen bags. I mean, I think I lived for 2 years off of the canned tuna and mayonnaise sandwiches. I mean, I had a living situation after college. We had 3 roommates, split the rent, and I saved $50 off my rent every month because I was the one who agreed to cut the grass. I mean, but most people don't make it in this industry because most people don't have the patience to persevere through all the muck. But it's rewarding when you get to the other side of it, man, if you can make it.
Yeah. And I watched your ESPN show today. I mean, I've watched it a little bit. I reached out to you and you gladly accepted to come on, and I really appreciate it. Even though I'm from Georgia, so I'm in the Falcons, Bulldogs kind of network over here. But at the same time, I respect what you do, and I look up to someone like you who puts your time in and put your work in, and now it's all coming to fruition. So guys like me who are smaller, who are just getting started, man, we look up to people like you in the radio business, and You do a great job with your show, bringing on guests and just being yourself. And that's the biggest thing I can pride myself on. I try to be myself. I don't try to be anyone I'm not. I don't try to be flamboyant or make, off the wall predictions or anything like that. I just be myself. I make my picks. I give predictions. I mean, this year I picked Alabama to win the whole thing. They win the whole thing. I picked Kansas City to win.
Bold choice,
Yeah,
Tyler,
and
going with
that's the thing,
Alabama.
and
You
that's the
really
thing.
went on a limb with that one.
I picked Georgia the year before, and we saw how that worked out for me. So I just thought with the pandemic going on this year, Nick Saban, a team going to coming off a few losses last year, they're going to be determined to rise back to the top this year. And LSU, that LSU Alabama rivalry, that's something I want to ask you about. Where does that rank for you in the college rivalries? You got Ohio State, Michigan, you got Florida State, Miami. Is Alabama LSU one of the top 3 rivalries in all of college football?
Nah, because it's not much of a rivalry. LSU hasn't won enough in it for it to be a rivalry. Historically, it's just the LSU fans may not like that, but LSU is interesting, man, because LSU doesn't have a natural geographic rival. So you're in Georgia, like Georgia has Georgia Tech, Auburn has Alabama, Florida has Florida State, Texas and Texas A&M. Of course, there's Army, Navy. You go around the country, there's Oregon State, Washington State, UCLA, USC. I mean, LSU doesn't have that. It's the only, Power 5 school in the state of Louisiana. At one point, 70 years ago, LSU and Tulane were rivals, but Tulane made a really smart decision sometime around the 30s to leave the SEC. That didn't bite him in the ass or anything.
Yeah, Georgia Tech did the same thing.
Right. At least Georgia Tech's still in a Power 5, but yeah, I mean that's so LSU basically their rival. It has gone by era. In the 50s and 60s, it was LSU Ole Miss. In the 70s, it was more Bear Bryant and Alabama. When you moved into the 90s, it was more Auburn. I mean, LSU Auburn played some historic matchups. Early middle 2000s when LSU and Florida were kind of flip-flopping national championships, that was the big game. LSU Bama got on everybody's radar because what happened in 2011 with the game of the century, and those great games they played. But man, when you lose 8 straight in the series, it just it can't be up there as one of the best rivalries in the sport. I mean, when it matters, it's as good a game individually as you'll see in a given year because you have so much NFL talent on the field.
Mm-hmm.
But man, as far as history and competitiveness, I mean, it's not close to other ones, man. And for me, I love the LSU Auburn game. I mean, I grew up really loving LSU, and coming up in the 90s when you had basically a wacky game every year with the barn burning and bring back the magic and Cecil Collins and the cigar game. I mean, every game had a name. Something wacky happened. So for me, that's the one that always is the one that kind of means more to me.
And I'm 30 minutes from Auburn too, so I'm kind of that Columbus, Georgia market, right there. So I keep up. It's unique. That's kind of why I started this show. Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. Everyone around here is basically rooting for one of those 3 teams. So that's kind of why I started this podcast, and then it just kind of took off into people started saying, why don't you do basketball? Why don't you do baseball? So I talk a little bit about it all, but football is the bones of the show. And, right now I'm in my draft process. I'm making my big board, and Ja'Marr Chase, he's a guy who, you look at the 2019 tape, he's by far, him and Justin Jefferson were pretty much the best 2 wide receivers last year statistically for me. But you look at him and you look at what he's able to do. He's 6 foot, 215-pound guy. He's really fast. He's very physical. What do you think about his pro ranks and kind of where do you see him? You have him as your number 1 wide receiver going into the NFL, Devontae Smith. It's either kind of him or Ja'Marr Chase. I like Chase over Smith just based off his attributes and his physicality. What do you think about Ja'Marr Chase?
So if you ask me Jamar or Devontae Smith, I'd go Jamar. And it's they're both so polished, and I think that was the benefit that Devontae had coming back this year is, man, he was already a polished route runner, but as much straight line speed as he has with his quick twitch, when he became a much more polished receiver this year as the number 1, especially after Jalen Waddle got hurt and proved even if you roll coverage his way, he can beat double teams. That's why he made himself tens of millions of dollars. The big difference, I'd say, is Jamar is just thicker. Jamar has all of that separation, the straight line speed, the big hands, the strong hands. But man, I worry about a guy like Devontae at 165, 170 pounds in the NFL. I mean, I get it. You've got guys like Tyreek Hill that are smaller, diminutive receivers. Deshaun Jackson made a hell of a living playing receiver in the NFL as a burner, and Devontae could certainly be that guy. But if I'm just talking about durability, I'm gonna rely a little more on the guy that I know can play inside and out and was a little bit thicker. And I think that's Jamar Chase, man. I had a chance to see him all throughout his high school career as well at Rummel, just down the street from us here. And he's just, boy, I would have loved to have seen him this year, but it's he a year ago in 2019 was a pro playing college football.
Yeah.
And as much as we saw Justin Jefferson dominate literally had more receiving yards than any rookie in the history of the NFL. And he was the number 2 on that team. I mean, that speaks to what type of receiver Jamar is and will be. I mean, he'll be a top 5 pick and is every bit deserving of it. But man, I think both those guys have awesome NFL careers, and it's probably just a matter of preference. And if it's the Eagles at 6, then it's probably Jamar, because the Eagles went with a smaller receiver last year. So I don't know that they pull the trigger there again. So Jamar's probably the first receiver to come off the board, but I think both guys are going to have awesome careers.
Yeah, and Chase is 1 for me, Smith's 2, and like you said, 165. I think he's got to get up to around 185, 190. If he does, look out, because Smith reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs. Of course, you get the Marvin Harrison comparison, but just new age football, he reminds me of a undersized Stephon Diggs. And with Chase, Daniel Jeremiah said it the best. I was watching film on Chase, and I just said, who does this guy remind me of? And then Daniel Jeremiah said Anquan Bolden, and he's basically a faster. I mean, he's faster. He's physical. He reminds you a lot of Anquan Bolden, what he did early on in his career with the Arizona Cardinals, Florida State Seminoles. Yeah. So I really like that comparison. So I think Ja'Marr Chase, I think his ceiling, he goes at 3 to the Miami Dolphins at 3. I think that's a really good possibility. You could see him reunite with Joe Burrow at 5 at Cincinnati, or Eagles at 6.
Dude, I don't want to go to Cincinnati. I mean, I love Joe Burrow too much. Cincinnati needs to get Joe Burrow an offensive line, bro. If they don't go anywhere other than offensive line at 5, especially if Penei Sewell's on the board, that's a total miss. I mean, I'd love to have Burrow thrown to Jamar again, but no, man. They need to get him some protection. That shattered his knee. I mean, come on, man.
Sewell, I like Penei Sewell a lot. He's a guy that the Bengals have been linked to, but you also got the Falcons at 4. So I'm a Falcons fan. So the question is, do you go quarterback at 4? And that's the biggest question mark for me in this NFL draft. What do the Falcons do at 4? Could you draft the offensive lineman to protect Matt Ryan? Yes, I could see that. Could you draft Parsons to come and join that linebacker crew with Deion Jones and Alukin? I see that. You got Surtain or Fairley, the top corner on the board. I could see that. But at the end of the day, I could also see them going quarterback, because you may not have a chance to be at the top 5 again. What are your thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons? Kind of Terry Fontenot, I'm sure you're a little familiar with him. Really like what I've seen out of him so far. So I'm a guy, yes, I wouldn't go quarterback at 4. I'd try to trade back and get some draft picks, because this roster has holes all over it with Atlanta. So, you know Terry Fontenot a little bit. What do you think he's thinking about? Do you think he's trying to raise the stakes up of that 4th pick and trying to get as much value out of it? Or do you think he goes quarterback there at 4?
I think they're a definite candidate to move up to take Zach Wilson at 2. I think they're taking their franchise quarterback who's going to replace Matt Ryan. For the same, like, when are you? There's only 2 ways that you're going to get a franchise quarterback in the NFL. You're either going to be bad enough to draft one at the top, or you get insanely lucky, like the Saints did, in catching Drew Brees on his 2nd contract after the Chargers kicked him to the curb, and you feel like you got your guy. And maybe the Saints might do that again with Jameis Winston this year. We'll see. But if I'm Atlanta, when are you realistically going to be positioned again to pick that high and to be positioned to get the guy that could be your franchise for the next decade plus? So I do think they go quarterback at 4. If it's trading up to take Zach Wilson at 2, if it's sitting at 4 and taking Justin Fields, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that that's the direction Atlanta's going to go and has to go. Now, as a Saints fan, it's interesting because you got Tom Brady in Tampa, and I think both Atlanta and Carolina are drafting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So there's going to be this possible sea change in the division where half of your division, I think, could be turning the page to its next franchise guy. They hope is going to be the franchise guy. Now, as a Saints fan, I hope you both whiff. I mean, I hope whoever you draft suck. I mean, I hope it's a Mitchell Trubisky redo or something like that. I mean, I hope it's awful, but I do think that's the direction Atlanta goes, and it's got to be so tempting when you're, especially if you're Terry Fontenot as your first draft and you have the 4th pick and you have enough capital to move up. But I guess like the bad part about picking 4 is you're bad and you're picking 4.
Yeah.
The good news about picking 4 is because you're bad and you have so many holes on your roster, it really don't matter which way you go because you're going to get a really good player that's going to make you better, should make you better immediately.
Yeah. And I'm all for drafting, not drafting a quarterback, but at the end of the day, I understand it. And that's the thing with a lot of fans. They're either one side or the other. I understand both ways. I understand if you want to, get some capital and address some other positions. I understand if you want to build that defense who couldn't stop a nosebleed last year. I mean, I understand if you want to build the defense or you want to draft the offensive line or the trenches, or if you go quarterback. So I'm all for Terry Fontenot. I'm putting all my eggs in his basket with Arthur Smith, and whatever they do, I'll trust what they do. But at the end of the day, I think that's the most intriguing spot for me in the NFL draft. What is going to happen at 4? What do they do? Do they move up? Do they move back? Do they stay pat? What do they do? And I know as a Saints fan, you'll be watching. And right now, the Saints and the Falcons kind of sit in similar predicaments right now with the salary cap. Saints, I think, are close to $60 million over the cap. I think Atlanta's close to 20 to 30 million over the cap. I mean, I've seen the Saints starting to make some moves, and Atlanta's cut some veterans as well. What do you think the Saints do are they going to be able to sign? Is Lattimore gone? I mean, do you think Lattimore's there's no way to keep him? Well, what do you think is going to happen with this roster?
So, by the way, I think that the second pick is the most interesting pick in the draft because what the Jets do with Darnold is they keep him and still continue to build around him with a new coach, or do they move that pick because who covets this? Who is so bullish on the second best quarterback in the draft after Lawrence goes 1? Is it Fields? Is it Wilson? Does someone really get a wild hair and love Mac Jones? So I think that's really interesting. Is going to be which quarterback is second to go. But to your point, and by the way, keep in mind, when you talk about Terry Fontenot coming from New Orleans, the Saints are notorious for trading up. That's been there. And this does dovetail into the salary cap conversation, which you just asked me about. But the Saints are notorious. Like, they don't trade back to get assets. If they see a guy they like, they are aggressive and they move up. The Saints have moved up. I forgot. I need to brush up on this number. I think it's 8 times in the last 5 drafts. It's like they trade up every year for a player. They traded up to get Alvin Kamara. They traded up to get Marcus Davenport. Like, if there's a guy they want, they're going to get him. Yeah. And they say, look, we'd rather have the guy we want and give up assets we need to get him. So it'll be interesting to see if Fontenot carries that same sort of mentality, because that's the Saints' perspective always in the draft. It'll be interesting to see if Fontenot does the same, because if he does, then you might be seeing Atlanta move up from 4 to 2 if there's a quarterback they're bullish on. But as far as the salary cap, this is the Saints' MO every year, man. They just kick the can down the road. They restructure deals. They carry a ton of dead money. And they somehow just find a way to make it work. Specifically with Lattimore, he ain't going anywhere. I mean, the only way Marshawn Lattimore is not back on the Saints roster is if they package him in a deal to send him to Seattle. But one of the cost saving moves they could do for Lattimore is sign him to a contract extension this offseason, pay him a massive signing bonus, and backload the contract so he carries a small cap number this year, which is very likely to happen.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Ryan Ramczyk, who's been an All-Pro right tackle. They'll do the same for both those guys who are entering their fifth year. So both those guys will be back, barring needing that as collateral in a trade to get Russell Wilson. But aside from that, there's no way those guys are gone. They're too valuable. And when you look at the Saints secondary, man, outside of Marshawn Lattimore, you got Janoris Jenkins, who's a little long in the tooth. You got Patrick Robinson, same. You got PJ Williams. I mean, there ain't a lot there. I mean, there's not a lot of meat on the bone for the Saints at corner outside of Lattimore, and you got a legit lockdown number one guy. You pay him and you keep him.
Yeah, and Williams is a guy. I think he's a free agent as well.
He is, yeah.
Fontenot, that connection there. That's what I want to know. Who is Fontenot looking at from the Saints possibly? Because that's all. I mean, relationships in this business it means a lot, and I want to see who he's going to go after. I know the Saints released a backup off of Easton a couple weeks ago, and Falcons fans, for one thing, they want every single player that gets cut or released, it's unreal. It can't happen. But at the end of the day, I feel like the Fontenot's going to go get at least 2 to 3 former Saints, or try to get them at least on the Atlanta Falcons. So that's interesting, and that's a smart point you brought up about him trading up. I know I know a good bit about him, but I haven't really thought. I only think about the trade up to Marcus Davenport. Some of these other later round picks you don't think about trading back up.
They just this past year they traded up to get Zach Bond in round 3. They traded back into round 3 to take Adam Troutman, the tight end. They were done, and they gave up next year's 6 to come back into round 7 to take Tommy Stevens. I mean, that's just what they do. That's just the mindset is we're not waiting for the draft to come to us. If there's a player on the board that we like, we're going to get him. That's the mindset. As far as free agents from New Orleans that could end up in Atlanta, a couple of names to keep an eye on. Trey Hendrickson just had a massive year.
I like him a lot.
13 and a half sacks, former third-round pick out of FAU, who had a really good college career coming from a small school. Got his opportunity to be a starter opposite Cam Jordan this year and blew up. 13 and a half sacks.
Yeah.
The tough part is the Saints aren't going to be able to afford him. For what a double-digit sack pass rusher will command in the NFL, the Saints don't have the cap space to pay him. So is that, but the flip side with Trey Hendrickson is he's only got 1 year. I mean, he's been around for 3 years, but there's only one breakout year. Is that enough to justify a 5-year contract at 15 to 18 million per? Somebody's going to pay it. Who is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Marcus Williams is someone the Saints have targeted that they just have to have back on the roster. So if there is one of their free agents they re-sign, it's going to be him. He's statistically been as good a safety as there is in the NFL. I think he plays a position where generally you only pay attention when he screws up. As he did. I mean, look, the Minneapolis Miracle is the most notorious play, but I think Williams is back. The other guy I'll tell you is Sheldon Rankins. Rankins is another former first-round pick by the Saints, who back in 2018 was having a monster year. 8.5 sacks. He was just dominant on the interior. And in the playoffs that year, he ruptured his Achilles. And then since then, he's had an ankle procedure. And then this last year, he injured his knee. And he's a little bit of damaged goods, but when he's right, he's a dominant player. And I don't know if the Saints are going to be able to afford to keep him and bring him back. So that's a guy that in the right spot, if he stays healthy, could be a really dominant interior player. Just a couple guys to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I read a report from sportsatl.com that said Sheldon Rankins was a great fit for the Falcons, especially with the connection. So that's something to watch out for. I'm just going to spit out a few things before we get out of here. Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill? Who are you? What are you on? Do you think you keep Taysom Hill as that kind of that gadget and the backup, or do you go to Jameis Winston, who has shown some promise in his NFL career? I'm a Florida State fan, so I've watched him at FSU. He's very aggressive. He believes in himself a lot, sometimes too much, but he can make every throw out there. What do you think about Jameis Winston, and who would you rather have on the Saints next year leading the Saints, Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston?
So Taysom Hill is a total non-starter. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Sean Payton is Sean Payton is as arrogant a coach as I've seen, but you know what? Some of that hubris comes because you've earned it, and you need a little bit of that. You need that kind of balls to attempt an onside kick in the second half of the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Sean's that guy.
He's got a little Bill Parcells. He got a lot of Bill Parcells in him, and
That's
that's
his mentor.
Yep.
So Bill Parcells is his mentor. So,
Yep.
And it served him well, by the way. I mean, I love Sean Payton. But he wanted to give the Taysom thing a go, and I think everyone realized it ain't never going to happen. So Taysom's under contract for another year, so he's going to be on the Saints roster, but he won't be the starting quarterback. I would say the smart money is on Jameis Winston, which I love. I think Jameis could be to the Saints now what Drew Brees was in 2006. Mm-hmm. A guy who's coming off his rookie contract, needed a fresh start. Jameis has all the ability in the world, all the ability to have been a Heisman Trophy winner, the number 1 overall pick, throw for 5,000 yards in the NFL, which only a handful of guys have done. He was on a terrible team in Tampa. And people say, well, look at this. Come on, man. Look at everybody everybody that accounted for a point in the Super Bowl. Not one of those players was on the team a year ago.
Yeah.
From Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown and Leonard Fournette all the way down to the kicker. So I think in the Saints offense with Sean Payton and those weapons, I think it could work with Jameis. But the bigger question is, can the Saints get a deal done for Russell Wilson? And that's what everyone here is keeping a keen eye on, because if that situation in Seattle continues to deteriorate, mm-hmm. and Wilson's agent has said point blank, there are 4 teams to which he'd accept a trade, and one of them is New Orleans. If New Orleans could put together a deal and get Russell Wilson here, then all of a sudden the Saints are the favorite in the NFC to win a Super Bowl, because you got the whole roster back with a quarterback that's mobile, which Drew Brees wasn't, and can push the ball downfield, which Drew Brees couldn't. Mm-hmm. Your 2 blind spots are gone. And, man, that's what everybody here is pulling for. If they could somehow pull a deal to get Russell Wilson. I'd put it at maybe a 20% probability.
Yeah.
But the more that situation in Seattle deteriorates, the more likely it becomes.
Lord, I hope not. I hope not. Because there's also word on the street Deshaun Watson could end up in Carolina, which that would be – I mean, if you got Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and Brady in the division, I mean, are you serious? That's unreal. But that's something to look out for sure. I feel like that relationship is kind of deteriorated a little bit over the years, which is weird because Russell Wilson's been such a Seahawks guy. The Seahawks were good before, but man, he's took them to kind of a new level almost. All these young kids nowadays, they're really high on the Seahawks last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And that's something to watch out for, Matt, right there. I want to talk a little bit about Zion Williamson, man, because this is a guy who I was very high on coming out. A lot of people said, oh, he'll be a bust. He doesn't have a position. He's 6'7", a little undersized. I don't want to hear it. The guy's explosive. The guy's got the inside game. He's going to develop the outside game. I feel like that's going to happen. He's such a wise kid beyond his years. Tell me a little bit about Zion Williamson making the All-Star game now in his 2nd year. So what are the expectations for Zion Williamson and this Pelicans team moving forward?
2nd year and hasn't even played a full season. Keep in mind, you had the abbreviated COVID season a year ago, and Zion didn't even debut till January because of the knee injury. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about a guy that's played 50, 60 total career games.
Yeah.
He is a unicorn in an NBA that has been redefined because of the success that the Warriors had shooting the 3. In an NBA where the team with the best record right now is the highest shooting percentage team from 3 in the history of the league. We'll see if the Jazz can maintain it, but it's where they are. Zion is a total outlier. At 6'7", as explosive as he is, and completely fearless. They played the Jazz a couple of nights ago. Mm-hmm. And Rudy Gobert is arguably the best defensive player, certainly the best defensive big in the league. Mm-hmm. And Rudy Gobert couldn't handle Zion attacking the rim. It is so fun to watch something other, and I love the NBA, by the way. Yeah. It is so fun to watch something other than dudes parked around the perimeter waiting for their open look to splash a three. To see someone actually attack and be aggressive and physical is awesome. And there's nobody else in the league like him. And he's only 20 years old. I mean, we've got another 15 years of this guy doing this. My hope selfishly is, this Pelicans organization, with new leadership, is able to build a winning roster around him to compete for and win championships, which they were unable to do with Chris Paul, which they were unable to do with Anthony Davis. I mean, this franchise has hit on big time stars in the draft and done nothing with it. They've got another bite at the apple. Let's see if they can convert with Zion. And you got David Griffin as the president of operations, and that's a guy who built a championship team around LeBron in Cleveland. And remember, they got a king's ransom for that from the Lakers in that Anthony Davis trade. I mean, they basically have every pick from the Lakers for the next 10 years. I mean, it's crazy how many assets.
They have so many draft picks too.
Yes.
So many draft picks, and then you have Brandon Ingram. So
yes.
You got Brandon Ingram, you got Zion Williamson, you have a nice little nucleus. They also have Jackson Hayes and some other guys who can still play, who are young in this league. So watch out for the Pelicans, man. They were a team I had kind of on that bubble, like 7, 8, 9 seed, maybe playing in for the play-in game. So I really like Zion Williamson. I think Van Gundy's gonna. I think that's a good hire. I feel like they needed a different voice from Gentry. I just felt like that was a nice time to make a move. So look out for Zion Williamson, man. Like you said, 20 years old, averaging 24 points, making his first All-Star game appearance. He's awesome to watch. All right, so before we get you out of here, Matt, I want to talk a little bit about the Eric Gilbert situation, man. What is going on with your boy? He's from Marietta, and he was, it was UGA or LSU. He picks LSU. Goes out, has, I think around 20 to 30 catches, 300 yards, couple touchdowns. Nice player to build on for the future. He transfers. He transfers, hits the portal. A lot of people thought he could stay at LSU. He goes to Florida. Now he's back in the portal. Rumor is it's basically he's going to go back to LSU or he's going to go to Georgia. That's kind of what the word on the street is. What do you think about that situation? And would LSU welcome him back into that locker room?
Hey, man, he's from Georgia. I figured you'd have the scoop. If he was your boy, I thought you were going to give me some scoop on Eric Gilbert.
Well, I think UGA is a team to watch out for. Why he hasn't picked him? He's already had one opportunity to pick him, had another opportunity to pick him. So you've always heard Georgia with Gilbert, but at the end of the day, I feel like he may be leaning toward going back to LSU. I'm not sure about that situation. I just didn't know if you had any LSU insider information on that. What do you think he's going to end up doing?
So since Eric left LSU, I mean, what happened at Florida, I have no idea. But what I can tell you is, as strange as the situation seems, where you have the highest rated tight end in the history of 247 Sports, who was the focal point of the LSU offense. Like the very first play of the season, they threw him the football.
Yeah.
When Terrace Marshall opted out, they were building the offense completely around Eric Gilbert. So it wasn't anything to do with what was going on the field. They were absolutely utilizing him as a weapon.
Yeah.
What I'm comfortable saying with Gilbert is many fans assume whenever guys opt out or things happen, most people assume one or two things. They assume grades or drugs. Like, let's just be honest. That's what fans do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you that with Gilbert, there's a lot more to the story. That I know that his family have a very legitimate, personal situation that they're dealing with, and that's what pulled him away from LSU.
Mm-hmm.
And as a dad, I can tell you, if that were my son, I would have absolutely wanted him closer to home. Not because of anything LSU did necessarily.
Yeah.
So when he left LSU, I was very surprised that he picked Florida and not Georgia to be closer to home. With situations like this, I've learned over the years, you don't speak in absolute, so you never say never. But I would be fall over stunned if he ended up back at LSU. I was very surprised he didn't pick Georgia to begin with when he first left LSU.
Yeah, me too.
And I'd be surprised again if his final destination wasn't Georgia, especially with JP Daniels there. And as much as Kirby gushed about tight ends after that Missouri game, and you can never have too many tight ends. I mean, there wasn't no doubt who he was talking to.
Yeah.
But, if this was just about, an on-field opportunity, he had it at LSU. And there's no doubt he had it at Florida because we just saw what Florida did with one of the best tight ends we've seen. It's like
he's the best tight end I think I've seen in college. I really do think he was the best tight end I've seen.
Certainly
unreal.
Had that type of season. And it's like, now you got that open spot. I mean, if you're Dan Mullen, you could say, hey, look, you can be this. And that made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And now he's leaving there. So suffice to say, as weird as the situation looks on the outside, it's legitimate because it's a strange, unorthodox situation. I guess the older I get, especially being a dad now too, it's just, of course you love the teams you cheer for, but more so whenever you cover young people that play college football or college sports, you realize they're young people. This kid just turned 19 last week. He's 19 years old. I mean, fans of if you're a fan of a certain team and God doesn't pick your school, like he's 19. He has legitimate things going on, like for him and the rest of his life. I just hope he makes a good choice and whatever is leading him astray, I hope he and his family figure it out and that he goes on to have a super successful career, man, because he's a super talented kid, man. The world is his oyster. So I hope he's able to realize all his goals.
Yeah, he's a great talent. I watched that Marietta team. They won the state championship at 7A in Georgia. I think Gilbert went both ways. So he's a guy who I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in the future. And we'll see what he picks, man. But Georgia, if Kirby's ever going to do it, man, I feel like this year is got to be one of the years that he's got to have this team in the playoff. And now winning it all, that's a different thing. But this Georgia team is very talented. And Kirby's got to get them in there. And hopefully, man, we'll get you back on the show later on during football season. Maybe I'll have you on when all the stuff's heating back up, Matt. But, hey, man, tell my listeners where they can find you on Twitter and, your radio show and all that good stuff before you get out of here, Matt.
Man, I'm on every social media platform. If you can spell my last name with all the vowels, you'll find me somewhere. I'm at Matt Moscona on everything, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram. You can find me there. And shows on 1045ESPN.com. So you'll find links to audio, video, podcasts, all that stuff. If you can spell my name, you can find me. I'm pretty much everywhere. All
right, Matt. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on my podcast. And I'll have it out, man. I'll send it to you. You can listen to it later on or, Kicking It with Crowder, basically anywhere you get your podcast. And I really appreciate you taking your time coming on here tonight, Matt.
You got it, Tyler. My pleasure, man. Have a great night.
All right, Matt. You too, brother. All right.